The silent approach. In the dead of night, when the world below slept, the sky above Earth whispered secrets that only a few could hear. Far away from the bustling cities and the endless noise of civilization, the Global Space Monitoring Station sat like a sentinel, keeping watch over the dark expanse of space. Tom Wilson, a seasoned night shift operator, was one of the few humans who understood the eerie quiet of space. He had seen it all: satellites, meteors, even distant ships drifting through the void. But tonight was different. It began with a flicker, just a brief, inexplicable glitch on the radar screen. Tom, half drowsy from the long hours, dismissed it as another system malfunction. He'd grown used to such interruptions. But then the flicker turned into a pulse, then a rapid series of pulses, each one growing stronger. His heart skipped a beat as the readings shifted, the signals becoming increasingly strange. It wasn't a typical space anomaly. This was something deliberate, something intelligent. He leaned forward, eyes narrowing. "Control, this is Station 7. Something's coming in fast, very fast." The tone in his voice had changed. No longer casual, no longer routine. There was something in his gut, a gnawing sensation, that told him this wasn't just another meteor or stray satellite. Whatever was out there, it was different. His fingers hovered over the diagnostic console, running several tests. They all came back with the same result. An object, massive in size, was on a direct collision course with Earth. But it wasn't just the size of the object that shocked Tom. It was the speed. The velocity at which it was approaching was unlike anything he had seen in his years of monitoring space. It wasn't just fast, it was impossibly fast. "General, you need to see this," Tom said, his voice now urgent. The words came out of him before he even realized they had formed. His hands were shaking, but he couldn't let fear take over. Not yet. There was still time to figure this out. Within minutes, the control room buzzed with activity. Military personnel poured in, their faces tense and focused, their hands moving quickly over buttons and levers. Among them stood General Roberts, a man whose presence alone could command an entire room, but even his stoic face betrayed the gravity of the situation. Tom pointed to the screen, his eyes wide with disbelief. "That," he said, his voice barely a whisper, "isn't just some random debris. It's coming straight for us." The object was massive, nearly a mile long. Its shape was unlike anything Tom had ever seen before. At first glance, it seemed to shimmer in the darkness of space, shifting in color like an oil spill in water, reflecting hues that shouldn't have been possible for something so far away. It was as though it didn't belong to this dimension. General Roberts stood behind him, his sharp eyes scanning the readouts. "It's slowing down," he muttered, watching the object maneuver itself into a high orbit above Earth. "What the hell is it doing?" The room fell silent as everyone stared at the screen, transfixed by the anomaly. The object hovered above the northern hemisphere, its presence as undeniable as it was perplexing. There were no signs of weapons, no hostile intentions at least, not that they could see. It just sat there, watching, observing, as if it had all the time in the universe to spare. And then, without warning, the object released a thin, pale beam of light that shot down towards the planet. It wasn't like anything they had ever seen, a beam that spread out like a spider's web across the Earth's surface, moving with a precision that defied logic. "What are they scanning?" one of the technicians asked aloud, her voice trembling slightly as she observed the data streams flooding in. Tom frowned. The readings weren't what they expected. They weren't focusing on Earth's cities or military installations, but on something else, something organic. The beam seemed to be mapping the very life of the planet, the plants, the animals, the oceans, and the atmosphere. "Sir," Tom said, his voice low, "they're not looking at us. They're looking at everything else." "Why would they be scanning nature?" General Roberts clenched his jaw. His mind raced, but no answer seemed to make sense. Was this a reconnaissance mission? A survey of the planet's resources? But then why did it feel so invasive? Before anyone could process the implications, the object began to glow. a pulsating red light that filled the room with an unearthly hum. The ship was powering up. The energy readings spiked so high that the monitors couldn't keep up. "They're powering up," shouted one of the technicians, his voice breaking the tension in the room. But the ship didn't attack. It didn't make any aggressive move. Instead, it simply vanished. One moment it was there, filling the screen with its immense presence. The next, it was gone, disappeared into the black void of space faster than the human eye could comprehend. Tom's eyes locked on the final data readings that appeared before the object left. His breath caught in his throat as he read them aloud. These readings, he trailed off, unable to finish the sentence. He had seen something like this before, biological markers, but these were off the charts. General Roberts looked at him, his voice low and almost a whisper. "You're telling me they were scared?" Tom nodded slowly. "I think we just scared them away." The general's face paled. "Get me the president. Now." The silent retreat. The night seemed to stretch on forever, each minute heavier than the last. As the glow from the radar screens flickered and died, Tom Wilson found himself staring at the now empty space where the alien vessel had once hovered. The control room had fallen eerily silent, as if the room itself was holding its breath, waiting for something to happen. The alien ship, or whatever it had been, was gone, but the feeling of unease lingered, gnawing at Tom's thoughts. The general was the first to break the stillness, his voice sharp as ever. "Get a full analysis on that data. Now." His command echoed off the walls, shaking everyone out of their stupor. The urgency in his tone was unmistakable. Something was wrong, something they couldn't yet understand. Tom, still in a daze, turned back to his console. The blinking lights seemed too bright, the monitors too loud, as if the whole system was screaming at him. He sifted through the data. The strange energy readings, the biological markers that shouldn't have been there, and then the sudden disappearance of the alien vessel. It didn't make sense. No spacecraft, human or alien, could achieve that kind of speed without leaving some trace behind. But there was something else, a strange pattern buried deep within the readings, almost like a faint echo, a ripple that reverberated through space. It was the same pattern he'd seen before, but only in studies of animal behavior, like the kind of reaction you'd get from a wild animal when faced with danger, fear. The alien ship hadn't just left, it had fled, and it had fled in terror. His mind raced. What had happened during those brief moments the ship had been over Earth? What had it seen or sensed that could cause a species that advanced to panic like this? "General," Tom said, his voice thick with disbelief, "I think I know what happened." He paused, swallowing hard. "The ship, it's like it was terrified of something." The general turned to him, his eyes narrowing. "Terrified? Of what?" Tom didn't have an answer. How could he? What could possibly terrify a civilization capable of traveling across the stars? Was it something on Earth itself? Something about humanity that had made the ship retreat so hastily? Before he could speak, the door to the control room slid open, and in walked Dr. Mary Roberts, the military scientist sent to the station just hours after the alien encounter. Her stern face was unreadable as she glanced at the monitors, taking in the data. "What's the status?" she asked, her voice steady and clinical. "The alien ship has left," General Roberts replied. "But there's something off about all this. We've been trying to analyze the data, but we're getting strange biological readings, biological patterns that match extreme fear. Fear. It's like they saw something on Earth that terrified them." Mary's lips pressed together, her brow furrowed. "I'm not sure what to make of that," she said. "But whatever it was, it must have been powerful." "We need to know what happened," the general said, his tone now harder than steel. "I want every available resource on this. We need to find out what scared them." But as the minutes passed, the sense of dread only grew. Every passing second seemed to add more weight to the air. Tom couldn't shake the feeling that they were missing something huge, something critical, something that could change everything. Outside the station, high above the Earth, the stars glittered coldly. The vast expanse of space was indifferent to the drama unfolding on the planet below. But that indifference was about to change. Somewhere out there, beyond the horizon of human knowledge, something else was watching. Something that had seen the alien ship leave in terror and wondered, perhaps, if they too should be afraid. Echoes in the dark. The days that followed the alien departure were filled with questions, too many questions, and not a single answer. The silence left in the wake of the encounter was deafening. Humanity had always wondered what lay beyond the stars, but now that something was out there, no one seemed ready for the terrifying unknown. At Pine Ridge Observatory, nestled deep in the Rocky Mountains, Dr. Jack Miller sat at his desk, surrounded by old telescopes, their lenses pointed toward the sky. The mountains were quiet, as they always were at night, but tonight there was an unsettling stillness in the air. It wasn't just the isolation of the observatory, it was the weight of the mystery that had been thrust upon him. He ran the data from the Global Space Monitoring Station over and over, but nothing made sense. The energy readings, the biological markers, the unnatural speed of the alien ship's departure, none of it aligned with anything he had ever studied. Jack had spent years studying the cosmos, mapping the stars, analyzing unknown signals, but this was something else. "Jack, you're looking at this all wrong." A voice broke through his thoughts. It was Mary Roberts, who had arrived at the observatory hours earlier. She stood behind him, peering over his shoulder at the same screen, her face taut with frustration. "What do you mean?" Jack asked without turning around. He had been trying to make sense of the data for hours, but no answer seemed to stick. It was as if the universe itself was mocking him. Mary's finger traced the edge of the screen. "Look at this pattern. The biological markers, the fear. It's not random. This isn't just a physiological response. This is a signal." Her eyes met his, dark with understanding. Something happened down there. Something specific. Jack felt a shiver run down his spine. "You mean something on Earth scared them?" She nodded. "Exactly. And I think I know what it was." Jack stood up abruptly, the chair scraping against the floor. "What do you mean? How could we possibly know that? The ship was here for such a short time, it barely even touched Earth." But Mary wasn't listening to him. She was already pulling up another set of data on her own screen. "You're not seeing the bigger picture, Jack. This ship wasn't just scanning the environment, it was scanning the life on Earth. And we're not talking about animals or plants here. There's something in the data that doesn't add up. It's the way they moved. It's almost like they were looking for something specific." Jack frowned. "So what? You think the ship was hunting? What could it possibly have been looking for?" Mary hesitated for a moment, her fingers hovering over the keyboard. "I think they were looking for us." A cold silence settled over the room. Jack's mind raced. But why? Why would they be looking for humanity? Mary's eyes locked onto his. Maybe they knew something we don't. Maybe they knew that Earth, we are more dangerous than we realize. The words hung heavy in the air, the weight of their implications settling into Jack's bones. "You're saying they were afraid of us?" "I'm saying," she replied, her voice steady, "that whatever they saw down there, it wasn't just fear. It was a reaction, a biological response. Something so primal, so human, that even an advanced alien race couldn't process it." Jack paced across the room, his mind spiraling. "So we scared them away because we're too unpredictable, too dangerous." Mary didn't say anything, but her silence spoke volumes. Jack rubbed his forehead, trying to make sense of it. "But that doesn't explain why they would even approach us in the first place. If we're so dangerous, why come here at all?" "I think," Mary said, "that's what we need to figure out next." As she spoke, Jack noticed something strange on the screen. A flicker, just a brief flash, but it was enough to catch his attention. He leaned forward, squinting at the monitor. The data was shifting again, this time in a new direction. It wasn't the same fear pattern they'd observed before. It was different, more intense. And it was coming from somewhere on Earth. "What is this?" Jack muttered, pointing at the readings. "This signal, it's not from the alien ship, it's coming from Earth." Mary's eyes widened as she quickly analyzed the new data. "Where is it coming from?" she demanded. Jack's heart skipped a beat as he saw the coordinates. They were marked near a remote part of the Amazon rainforest, a place no one had ever considered. It's coming from the jungle," he said slowly, his voice barely audible. Mary stared at the screen, her mind racing. "That's impossible. There's nothing there." But Jack's gaze never left the screen. "Tell that to the aliens, the forgotten signal." The air was thick with the buzz of activity at Pine Ridge Observatory. Mary and Jack had barely left the control room since discovering the anomalous signal from the Amazon. They couldn't afford to, not when the implications were so massive. The data was still streaming in, but the more they analyzed it, the more questions arose. No one, not even the most seasoned experts, could explain the signal they had detected. The more Jack reviewed it, the more it felt unnatural. "You still think it's some sort of natural phenomenon?" Jack asked, his voice laced with doubt as he glanced at the screen again. "No," Mary answered, shaking her head. "No, this isn't anything we've seen before. It's too precise, too deliberate. Someone, or something, is sending this signal, and I don't think it's just Earth's wildlife." Jack leaned back in his chair, rubbing his temples. He had never imagined that one day, a simple discovery in the stars would lead to a tangled mess of mysteries that kept him up at night. "If it's not natural," he said, his voice trailing off, "then what are we dealing with?" Before Mary could answer, the phone on Jack's desk rang, cutting through the tension like a knife. Jack snatched it up, the anticipation hanging heavy in the room. "Dr. Miller speaking." "Jack," came the voice of General Roberts from the other end, "we've got a problem. I need you to get to Washington. Now." Jack's heart skipped. There was urgency in the general's voice, a note of finality. "What's going on, sir?" "We're getting reports from all over the world," Roberts said, his voice dropping to a whisper. "Something's happening in the Amazon. It's spreading. We can't ignore it anymore. We need you on the ground." Mary's eyes met Jack's. "The signal, it's already happening." Jack nodded grimly. He had no more time for questions. He grabbed his coat and headed toward the door. "I'll be there as soon as I can." The Amazon jungle, the heart of the mystery. Hours later, Jack and Mary found themselves descending into the heart of the Amazon, flying over dense green canopies that stretched for miles. The jungle below was as wild and untamed as the mystery they were chasing. What was happening in that dense, uncharted wilderness? They still didn't know, but they were about to find out. Their small plane circled the area before landing on a narrow strip of dirt, the wheels bumping as they touched down. Waiting for them was a team of military personnel, led by Lieutenant Sarah Blake, a no-nonsense officer who had been briefed on the situation only minutes before. "Welcome to the front lines," Blake said dryly as she greeted them, offering them both a nod before turning toward the jungle. "We've got more problems than we can handle out here. Follow me." As the team began to gather more data, Jack felt a sudden chill run down his spine. The monolith was silent, but its presence felt overwhelming, as though the stone itself was watching them. He reached out, hesitated, and then touched it. The moment his fingers made contact, the air around them seemed to hum, a low vibration that resonated deep in his chest. "What the hell was that?" Blake said, her hand on her weapon, ready for anything. But it was Mary who spoke next, her voice barely a whisper. I think we've just activated it." The monolith's symbols began to glow brighter, the pulse growing more intense. Something had been triggered, and something, or someone, was waking up. The awakening. The jungle seemed to hold its breath. As Jack's fingers pulled away from the monolith, the world around them began to change. The once steady hum that vibrated through the air grew louder, more pronounced, as though the very atmosphere was being charged with an unseen energy. The symbols etched into the surface of the ancient stone glowed with an eerie light, their patterns shifting and pulsing in time with the strained vibrations. Jack stumbled backward, his mind racing to understand what was happening. The air itself felt thick, charged with something beyond comprehension. And then, as if the monolith itself had a heartbeat, a deep, resonating sound echoed from within it, a sound so primal, so ancient, that it seemed to reverberate through their bones. "What did you do?" Blake snapped, her hand on the grip of her weapon, her voice strained with uncertainty. I didn't do anything," Jack stammered, his eyes wide. "It was already happening. It's like it woke up on its own." Mary stepped forward cautiously, her expression one of awe and terror. "No, this wasn't just some random artifact. This was a signal, a beacon." Blake frowned, her eyes darting around the jungle, her instincts on edge. "A beacon for what?" "That's what we need to figure out," Mary said, her voice low but steady. "I think it was meant for someone, or something." The glow from the symbols intensified, bathing the area in an unnatural light. For a moment, the jungle seemed to fall silent. Every rustle, every insect call, every animal sound disappeared, as if nature itself had been stunned by the monolith's awakening. Suddenly, the ground beneath them rumbled. At first, it was just a tremor, a shiver beneath their feet. But then the vibrations grew, and the earth seemed to shift, as if the jungle itself was alive and responding to the monolith's call. A deep, groaning sound emerged from below the surface, like the slow turning of a massive wheel. "Get back," Blake shouted, pulling her rifle from its holster and aiming it at the monolith, her eyes scanning the area for any sign of threat. But the threat wasn't from outside. The danger was from within the monolith itself. Without warning, a massive crack appeared along the stone's surface, running from top to bottom. The symbols shifted, as if the stone was reacting to some kind of internal command. The sound grew louder, the vibrations almost unbearable as a low, guttural hum emanated from the crack. "Everyone, stay clear," Blake shouted, her voice barely audible over the growing noise. "We don't know what this is, but it's not friendly." Before anyone could react, the crack in the monolith widened, and from within it, a strange light shot upward, a blinding beam that lit up the entire jungle, casting long shadows across the landscape. The light shimmered, swirling, taking shape before their very eyes. From the core of the monolith, a figure began to emerge. It was unlike anything they had ever seen. The figure was tall, its body composed of shimmering light, translucent but somehow solid, with limbs that seemed to shift and reassemble as it moved. The creature had no face, no distinct features, just a vague, humanoid silhouette. But its presence was undeniable. It radiated power, knowledge, and something else, something darker. The air seemed to grow colder as it took its first steps, its movements slow and deliberate, as if it was learning how to interact with this world. Jack's heart raced. He had no idea what he was seeing, but he knew one thing for certain: it wasn't human. The creature stopped, standing still for a moment, its form flickering like a hologram caught in a gust of wind. Then, in a voice that resonated in their minds, rather than through their ears, it spoke. "You have awakened me." The words sent a chill through their spines, as though they weren't meant for human ears. The creature's voice was deep, ancient, and held an undeniable weight of authority. "Who are you?" Jack asked, his voice barely more than a whisper, his mind struggling to comprehend the magnitude of what was happening. The creature did not respond immediately. Instead, it extended one of its shimmering arms toward the group, its fingers elongated and glowing with an eerie blue light. As it moved, the temperature in the air dropped, the humidity of the jungle replaced by a biting cold that cut through their clothing. "You," the creature said again, its voice now resonating with a sense of understanding. "You are not the ones I seek." Blake stepped forward cautiously, her gun still drawn but lowered now. "Then who are you looking for?" The creature's form seemed to shimmer again, as though it was considering the question. "Not you," it said again, its tone almost amused. But you have awakened something ancient, something buried. It paused, and the group held their breath, waiting for it to continue. Humanity's presence here has disturbed the balance. You have unknowingly called forth that which was hidden, and now you will know its wrath. The reckoning. The air crackled with an unnatural energy. The shimmering figure before them, an entity of light and shadow, had just spoken words that echoed through their minds, words that carried a terrifying weight. You have awakened something ancient, something buried. The air around them grew colder, the once bustling jungle silent in the wake of the monolith's activation. Jack's heart pounded in his chest, his mind racing. What had they unleashed? What kind of power stood before them? The creature, standing impossibly still, flickered like a failing hologram, yet its presence felt more real than anything he'd ever known. It was alive, but it was not human. Blake, always the pragmatist, was the first to regain her composure. Her gun was still lowered, but she stepped forward slowly, her eyes narrowed in determination. "What do you want?" she demanded, her voice steady but tinged with fear. She had been in enough dangerous situations to know that now wasn't the time to back down. The entity's form rippled, shifting like liquid light. "I do not want," it replied, its voice filling their minds with an ancient, unyielding power. "I exist. I have always existed. I was hidden until the call reached me. And now I will restore balance." The word balance hung in the air, thick with a meaning none of them could yet grasp. Mary, ever the thinker, stepped forward, her voice calm but laced with an urgent need for understanding. "Restore balance. What does that mean? And why us?" The creature's form seemed to shimmer, its light dimming and intensifying in waves. "Humanity has disturbed the order of this world. The signal you activated was not for you. You were not meant to find me. But now that you have, the consequences will follow." A chill spread across the clearing, and the once warm, humid air of the Amazon now felt like a winter storm closing in. Blake looked around, her military instincts kicking in. "I'm not letting this thing dictate what happens next. We need answers, and we need to stop it from whatever it's planning." Suddenly, without warning, the ground beneath them trembled again. The entity's light flared brighter, casting long, jagged shadows against the trees. "You cannot stop what has already begun," it said, its voice now dripping with something like cold amusement. "What you have awoken will not be so easily silenced. The balance is already tipping, and soon the world will feel its weight." Jack felt a sickening weight settle in his stomach. The implications of the creature's words were beginning to take shape, and they weren't good. "Balance," he repeated quietly, to himself more than anyone else. "What do you mean? What balance are you talking about?" The entity's form flickered again, and the light around them grew harsh, nearly blinding. For a brief moment, Jack saw something horrifying, flash across the creature's shimmering surface. A vision, perhaps. He saw cities burning, skies turning black, oceans boiling over. Humanity, as they knew it, was being torn apart. He could see the destruction spread like a wave, and with it, the faces of people, helpless, afraid, lost. And then, just as quickly, it was gone. The entity seemed to sense the shock that rippled through the group, for it spoke again, its voice calm, but filled with a weight of finality. "You have awakened me, yes, but it is not I who will bring destruction. It is the world that will strike back. Your kind has disturbed the ancient equilibrium, and now the forces of the earth itself will correct the imbalance." The jungle around them began to stir, the trees shaking as if alive, the ground beneath their feet rippling. The sounds of nature had returned, but they were different now, warped, distorted, like the world itself was groaning in protest. "We have to stop it," Mary said urgently, her voice filled with growing panic. "This creature isn't the threat, it's whatever it's connected to. The world, the earth itself, is reacting to us." Blake turned to the others, her expression hardening with resolve. "We've faced threats before. This isn't the first time we had to fight something we didn't understand, but this is bigger, and we need to find a way to fight it before it's too late. The entity seemed to sense their defiance, for its form flickered again, its light growing more intense, almost blinding. You cannot fight what is already part of you. Humanity has always been connected to the earth, but you have forgotten your place. Now the reckoning will come. The word reckoning sent a shiver down Jack's spine. They weren't just up against an alien intelligence or a rogue entity. No, this was bigger. This was a battle for humanity's very existence. The earth was waking up, and it was angry. Suddenly, as if in response to the creature's words, a great rumble came from deep within the jungle. The trees shuddered, and the ground began to crack open, sending plumes of smoke and dust into the air. From the cracks in the earth, strange, vine-like tendrils began to emerge, their twisted shapes pulsing with an unnatural energy. Mary grabbed Jack's arm, her grip tight. "We need to move, now." Blake was already taking action, pulling out a map and giving orders to her team. "Get to the extraction point. We've got to get to a safer location and regroup. If this thing is right, we don't have much time." But Jack knew, whatever they had awoken was far beyond what they could fight off. It wasn't just a matter of survival anymore. It was about understanding what was happening before it was too late. They had to figure out how to stop this reckoning before humanity paid the price. As the jungle seemed to shift and crack under the weight of something ancient and terrifying, Jack couldn't shake the feeling that they were no longer in control. The earth was reacting to them, not just to the monolith, but to the entire human race, and whatever had been unleashed, it was only the beginning.